Love, 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 love. Just readings full of love. Did you catch that? I have a cynical friend from my high school days that every now and then will say that to me. What are you going to preach on this weekend? Love? Yep. In verse 16 of that passage of John, the you in there is plural. You did not choose me, I chose you. And that's very fitting because we're in this together. We are a community. And so as we think about that, like, what are we being asked to do? To bear fruit. But not just as individuals. This has never just been an individual game. It's this plural reality. And in reality, as Jesus says, you didn't choose me. That's its own important insight for us. The word gospel comes from two Old English words that end up meaning good story or God's story. And that's very good for us. I think that's the lens through which to look at this. That it's God's story, we're just living in it, is another way to think of it. That when we make up sentences to talk about our relationship to God, God should be the subject and the actor. And so that we would say, it's not I chose Jesus, God chose me, Jesus chose me, Jesus brings me to new life. Now, I understand it's a both and, as truths often are. Ultimately, God lays at our feet his choice of us. He doesn't force us into that. That's how real love works. That's how truth works. And so there is that space where we have to make some action to connect to it. But first and foremost, it's his action. Well, that should give us something to think about then. Who are we and whose are we? And then how that impacts each other. Because when Jesus went to choose teams, whenever you think of choosing, I don't know about you, but I was a pretty mediocre athlete. So like in street games, in the neighborhood, they'd choose up teams. I was never first or second or third, maybe fourth or fifth. Never last, but, I shouldn't say never. Maybe I blocked out those memories, but the reality is, when we choose teams, there can be a little anxiety around that. But when we stop and think, okay, when Jesus chose his team, who did he pick? Well, a lot of fishermen who are known to be crude, foul-mouthed, ill-tempered, hot-headed, me. We can start to identify with that. He had a tax collector in there, a little bit of a swindler. He had the zealot, a fanatic. He didn't assemble the team I think we would think he would have assembled. People who were doing it all right. He chose those guys. And then after that choice, they had to act. Well, how do we see the choice that Jesus has made to us? And how that impacts each other? And when we go back to our childhood examples, or even more recent examples, if we've been put on a team, whether it's in school or in work groups, here, I want you two to work together, and you're like, oh, great, here we go. Is there anything more disappointing sometimes in group work? There's always the person that's way out front. There's always the person that just puts their name on at the end. But why were we all chosen? What is God asking of all of us? And how that impacts each other. It's important. It connects to this Eucharist. It is a communion with Jesus, absolutely, in the real presence, but also with each other. Communion tells us of our unity. One holy Catholic apostolic church. And so as we bring all of that together and say, I was chosen, what that necessarily also has to mean is, and so were you. And then we start to think about the ways in which we work together and that we seek a common vision that Jesus has laid out for us. Love one another. It's a command. It's not an idea. It's not it'd be nice if you. It's a command. And when someone commands us to do something, then we know first and foremost it isn't an emotion. It's something much more deep. It's something that's asked of us even when we don't feel it. That's the defining characteristic to me of love. It's what I do when I don't feel like doing it. Getting up early on a cold, wet day working in a space where we're just exhausted. We say, but I'm gonna do it because I'm faithful. I was commanded to do it. We've been chosen. It is God's story that we live in, and we are perfectly loved. And so as we look for the ways in which to take the choice that was made of us and share it with others, may we never lose sight of that. We were chosen. Not in the sense of like, well, everyone's on the team, but in the personal, individual way to say the unique gifts and talents that you bring to this team, the team of your family, the team of this parish, of our communities. As I said, we weren't chosen any more than any of us chose our mom. This is what God did for us. And so then our response becomes, what will we do with his choice? How will we act within his story, God's story, the gospel? That's what he said to them then, and it's what he says to us now. You've got no greater love than to lay it down for a friend. And I command you to do it. And he didn't just do it in word, he did it in deed. And then he gave us this Eucharist, the ongoing memorial of that love. And then he says, I choose you. And we will take him within us. And when we leave here, it's part of that team, it's part of that vision, it's part of that transformation to bring the kingdom of God to earth. It's needed now more than ever. It is the moment that we have. It is a gift in itself, and it is an invitation for action. But it starts with his action first. We've been chosen. Now what? May God be praised.